Welcome to episode 51 of the Series About Security podcast for August 7th, 2013, brought to you by the Center for Education and Research in Information Assurance and Security, or CERIAS, at Purdue University. I'm Preston Wiley, and I'm joined by Mike Hill and no Keith again this week. So I have the first article today, and it's related to Tor, and basically there was news that this hosting company called Freedom Hosting was basically shut down, and the person who ran it was arrested in Ireland via U.S. extradition request. And basically, anybody not familiar with Tor or Freedom Hosting, Tor allows you to create these hidden websites, essentially, that are only accessible through Tor. And the reason you want to do this is essentially to hide the location of your website, essentially. So basically, after the arrest of this person, all the websites on Freedom Hosting were allegedly shut down. Whenever you attempted to go to them, you get this error page that said this site's down due to maintenance. But some person checked on that actual URL, and hidden within it was a piece of JavaScript code that was essentially distributed to a bunch of hackers or security researchers, whatever you want to call them, which they ended up dissecting and discovered that it was actually it took advantage of a vulnerability within Firefox 17, and the purpose of the code was to run a Windows executable file and send the host name and some other information to a server in I think Virginia. Yeah. So a lot of people are guessing that the FBI is responsible for this piece of JavaScript code. The thing that's the most interesting about this particular piece of malware is all it does is essentially send your information to a central server. I mean, it could have installed malware, it could have done other malicious things to your computer, but all it chose to do was send essentially your MAC address and your host name and I guess IP address to a server in Virginia. And so people are suspecting that the FBI is responsible for this. Now, Freedom Hosting has a bad reputation. I mean, they were known to host a bunch of criminal things, but they also hosted some legitimate things like human rights sites and things like that were maybe from people in countries that they would not have been treated well if they would have, hosted the sites within their own country or something like that. So this affected more than just the criminal element. This affected other sites as well, and the malware, I think, was installed on pretty much every Freedom Hosting site out there, and this information was sent to some mystery group or organization somewhere in Virginia. So I thought this was, and Keith actually is the one that recommended this article. So, but I saw this as well and thought about talking about it. So I thought it was interesting. I thought it was worth talking about because, especially in the climate we're in now with the NSA information, and there's been some other information about the DEA doing some stuff that they probably shouldn't have been doing, and things like that as well, which we're not going to talk about today. But you can search for it and find some information on the DEA doing some potentially questionable things as well.
Yeah, well, it really seemed to be a very targeted piece of malware. Like you said, it could have done a lot more. didn't do a whole lot, but it did reveal IP addresses to this location in Virginia, and who knows what group is behind that. Whether coincidence or not, it targeted Firefox 17, which is apparently the most popular version for the Tor browser bundle as well. So it seems like this may have been their intention, was just to hit this Tor traffic in the Freedom hosting sites. And unfortunately, I think this is the ugly side of it. When you have a service like Tor that can hide your identity, there are people that want to use it for good, as you said, human rights, they want to protect their identity. In some countries, they can hide the information they're trying to get, so they won't be, punished for that. But on the other hand, it can be used for very bad things, things like child pornography and things of that nature, which we don't want, and we want those things to be shut down. So this is very interesting because it's a tool that can be used for good and for evil, and I for one would like to see the malicious, the sites that are doing evil things kind of shut down and taken offline.
And that's
true
true
for sites doing good things.
That's true
well.
for most security tools. They can be used for good things and they can be used for bad things.
Yeah. What I would hope is that the information being collected, and I don't know, it seems like, as you said, it was distributed to all the sites on the Freedom hosting, even the sites that at least claim to be doing good things and most likely were. It seems like whoever collected information would be able to make an assessment. If it is the government that's collecting that, and the site, the URL that was being visited, they could say, okay, this was not somebody necessarily wanting to do bad things or do something illegal. But who knows? And I doubt they're going to actually make any comment on it, that they were the ones, if it was our government behind it collecting it. And I don't know who else would just collect that type of information without actually distributing, malware in the process and taking over the machines and doing much more malicious stuff. So.
Right, and the other thing to note is that the problem is fixed. The Firefox fixed the vulnerability within Firefox 17, and the Tor browser bundle was updated to fix that, and it was JavaScript code, and you could disable JavaScript from running within the Tor browser, but I think it was enabled by default. They include no script with the Tor browser bundle, but it was turned essentially off.
It's turned off
automatically, which I guess was for usability purposes, I suppose. But there's this S near the address bar that you can click to turn scripting off. So it's fixed, and but who knows how many people got impacted by it, and especially people going to, potentially legitimate sites.
Right.
But it's one of those things we probably will never fully know who was behind it or what the information is being used for or anything like that. The arrest of the individual who was responsible for it may overall be a good thing, but it seems like they may have stepped on some toes of legitimate places in order to go after the illegitimate places.
And that might have been, the fact that this was even discovered, that might have been where, whoever was behind this malware may have overreached, because this is what got it out into the wild, and as you said, the security researchers, hackers started to look at it and see what was happening. Had they kept it on more of a low-key scale, it's likely this wouldn't have even been noticed, depending on what sites they targeted. But they targeted enough, legitimate appearing sites that people visited those and were able to discover, I think that it was embedded within like an iframe using the JavaScript. So now really that difficult to find if you're looking for it. So once people became aware of it, they were able to discover it was there. And had they not targeted every single site, under was it Freedom Hosting? That's the name, right?
Yeah.
If it hadn't been every single site being hosted under that, it may have not been discovered. It still may have, but I think the likelihood would have gone down greatly. And they could have. I mean, it was implied in this article that the government's been doing these things, have done these things before, but they've never really been able to get their hands on the code that executed. And in this case, they were, and I think it's because they targeted so many different sites that it's able to get out there. So essentially, like you said, Firefox's Tor browser bundle released an update. Firefox is also releasing updates. So essentially this functionality has been cut off unless there's additional functionality that's unknown in the current browsers, which there always could be. The capability of whatever organization was grabbing this information has been cut off to a certain degree.
Right.
Folks that are using Tor, depending on the type of user, are probably running, are probably really good at computers and running versions that are on top of this type of news. So you probably have already updated and prevented themselves from this type of malware.
Right. All right, and that's that one. So now Mike has the next article.
Okay, thank you, Preston. Twitter just released what they're dubbing version 2.0 of their two-factor authentication. I think this just rolled out yesterday, and in this version of it, they have gone away from the SMS codes that they initially started with, which I think we talked about in a previous podcast, and they've gone, I think, to a much more secure version of it. In this version, when you enroll into this, your phone creates a 2048-bit RSA key pair where the private key is stored on your device and the public key is sent to Twitter. So what is nice about this design is the secret, the private key, never leaves your mobile device. Now the other thing that they did is they also provided a backup code. And I think they actually came up with a very innovative way of doing this. They came up with a way of where you start off with a seed that is hashed 10,000 times, and that is what is stored, gets stored by Twitter. And then the backup code you receive is the seed hashed 9,999 times. And that's a code you can write down and store in a safe place so that if you lose your device or don't have it available, you can log into Twitter. And when you do, use that backup code, Twitter will then hash it one additional time, and it will check and see if it matches what's stored in its system. And if it does, then it'll allow you to log in. And then what it does is, I believe the next time you generate, then you would generate a new code, which would be it hash 9,998 times, and the one that gets stored with Twitter would be the one you sent previously, which was hashed 9,999 times. So effectively, you get nearly 10,000 backup codes, though I don't think you would ever realistically use that many. But the neat thing about the solution they came up with is that the secret's never stored with Twitter. The secret's stored with your device, so the private key stays on your device. I actually logged in. I had signed up for their two-factor initially, the SMS-based version, and today I signed in and changed my account to use this new version, which I had to go and get the update on my iPhone and apply it. And then what I was able to do was go in and tell on my mobile device and say, I want to use the two-factor authentication. And it gave me the code, which I wrote down. And then from my computer, I logged in, and it came up after I logged in. It says, waiting on your device, essentially, for you to complete login. And when I went to my phone and looked at it, using the Twitter app, it said I had a login request, and it had my location, which was slightly off, probably because it's using my IP address as my location, but it said, attempted login from this location in Indiana using a Windows machine, using Firefox, 26 or something like that. do you approve this request? And I had a checkbox and an X, and if I clicked the checkbox, then I was in. But clearly, if I got a request from someone in Florida and I'm sitting here in Indiana, I could say, no, do not allow that request to go through. So that's pretty cool too. So I think this is a really good step forward from what they previously released on two-factor authentication. And the other thing, one of the articles mentioned, in light of NSA, I mean, we kind of talked about, this has been going on for several weeks now. We've talked about it since, Edward Snowden revealed, the spy programs that were taking place, is that nothing gets stored at Twitter that is private. It's only the public key that gets stored with Twitter. So there's nothing, if NSA approaches Twitter and says, we want access to that code, there's really nothing they can provide. It has to be the private key that is stored within your mobile device, which is never sent to Twitter.
Right. Well, this is other things. I mean, we talked about with the SMS thing, there was no way for, like, I think it was the Washington Post thing, their Twitter feed got hacked. There was no real way for them to use it with the SMS messaging system easily. With this, there's a little bit more opportunity to do it, because you could share an account, and one person would essentially be responsible for allowing the account in. So if you have if you're a newspaper and you have a correspondent somewhere, you could have somebody in charge of, they get this alert saying, verify this,
Yeah.
and you could verify it. So I think it's a lot more usable in that sense as well. Still, I still think it's only tied to one device. So there's only one device that can do this authorization to log in, but I haven't tested that.
Yeah, I haven't tested that feature either. I'm curious.
So, and the backup codes allows somebody to call in and say, hey, I need into Twitter, and you can, instead of doing that, you could give them the backup code and then generate a new one. So I think it's a little bit more flexible than what their previous system was as far as that goes, and a bit more usable. But the thing I like about it, as you mentioned, is that they designed it in a way so that they do not have any of your secret information. So they essentially separated themselves from having your secret. I believe with Google, with the Google authentication, they have a secret and you have the same secret. And basically when you generate a code, they can generate the same code because you both have the same secret. So, you're kind of in a way trusting them to keep your secret safe, right? From the NSA or the FBI or whatever, Where with Twitter, there's no, they don't have it. So there's nothing. So even with legal documents sent to them, they can say, well, we don't have the secret.
Yeah.
It's on their own device or whatever. And that's true with both the mobile system and with the backup codes. Since the backup codes are using hashing, there's no way they can reverse that hash and get your secret code. I mean, you could brute force it.
Right.
But I mean, that's about it. So I think that was an interesting direction that they went, and I think it's a good one. I mean, especially with everything that's been going on, them saying, well, we're not going to keep your secrets. I think that's a good and interesting way to go. I like it, and I would like to see how well it works.
Yeah, I think it's much better than version 1.0 of their two-factor authentication, which was a step forward for them, but I feel like this is a bigger step forward. I did want to verify, because I was curious. I didn't see anything that said whether or not you can install this on multiple devices, so while you were talking, I tried to install it on my iPad here, and basically you can't. You can't have it active on two devices. Okay. It says it is enabled on another device for this account. To enable it on this device, I must first disable it from the other device.
Okay.
And if I can't access that other device, contact support.
Right. Well, and unlike with the unlike with Google Authenticator, which technically you can use on multiple devices if you set it up at the beginning, this one, there seems to be absolutely, well, I won't say no way. It seems to be more difficult to use on multiple devices at the same time, because the way it works is when you first enable it, it generates that private public key and sends the public key on to Twitter. So you're generating a key when you enable it on your device for Twitter. So
yeah, I mean, I could see some ways they could do that. It might get really complicated because ideally, I think instead of this device sharing with my phone, I think we'd want separate private keys for each device. But then I think in order to do that, maybe if I try to go through this step here, it'd be like, oh, well, you need to go back to your main device, maybe have one tagged as the main device, maybe my phone is the main device, and click and say that is okay.
Right. Well, I think Google even is. I mean, you're not technically. It's not technically designed to be used on more than one device either. But if you have both devices with you, when you have the code that is on the screen, you can scan it in both devices or enter it in both devices, or you can even write it down and enter it into the devices later, which allows you to use it on multiple devices at the same time, which is nice, but it does.
But then it
reduces security a little bit.
Security,
Then you have it on 2 devices or 3 devices or however, and if you write it down, then somebody sees it, then they put it on their own device too. So I don't know. I didn't see any way to like regenerate a private key or anything like that. But I guess you could enable it in. I don't know what happens if you lose your phone, for example, and you're like, oh no, and you want to set it up on a new device.
Well, I've been thinking about that. I didn't test these scenarios, but I think what would happen is when you log in with that backup code, you get into your full Twitter account on your computer, and I think, I don't know if they have instructions on this, but I would assume that you could go and say, okay, I want to turn off this two-factor authentication, and then from the new device, click, I want to enable two-factor authentication, and then you would set up a new code. But the other thing I was curious about along those same lines is, let's just say I forgot my phone, and I really need to get into Twitter to post an important link to this episode, So I use my backup code. What's unclear to me is then the next time I go to my device, do I need to then generate a new backup code? Is that backup code one time only? The way you talked about how it counted down from 10,000, I was under the impression that you can only use it it's a one-time backup code. But does my device automatically then update and it prompts me the next time I use my device, write down this code now because this is your backup code?
I guess you'll have to test that out.
I'll have to test that out.
Whatever. I don't know. I think they may have some issues with it. I mean, I think the real question that is, and that's a security question, is what happens if I lose my device and I don't have a backup code?
Well, you're calling support.
Right.
We're back to calling support.
And what level of security do they have there? What do I have to provide them? The problem is Twitter doesn't really gather much information about you at all. They don't even have your name necessarily.
But they do have your email address.
They have your email address, and that's about it. That's about all the information Twitter gathers about you is your email address.
Well, I still think this is a way to go. I'm still in favor of this kind of model. When something like that happens, if you have to do it via email, make it, click this link. This link will be available 24 hours from now. And give anyone else that maybe can access that email account the ability to say, wait, somebody's trying to do something. And they essentially lock you out for a day. I mean, if you lose your device or you get stolen and you lose your backup code, I think it's a small fine to pay for that happening, because really everything went wrong in that scenario. And I think we're too much an instant gratification society where I shouldn't have to wait at all. By giving like a 24-hour window, I'm thinking back to the Matt Honan attack through Wired. If there had been a 24-hour window, Matt probably would have started to see things or knew things were wrong before somebody could have completely just
Right.
owned his information.
Well, and that's really the question that is for a lot of two-factor authentication things, and I think a lot of vulnerability comes with, okay, I lost my phone, I don't have a backup code, what do I do?
Yeah.
You know, and I think that could be an issue, especially with Twitter, who doesn't keep really any information on its users, and that's by design.
Right.
That's essentially how their model is, to not collect information. And I think their two-factor authentication system, where they don't even have your secret,
Right.
speaks to that. So, well, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I think, though, I applaud the effort. I think folks should update their Twitter apps if they haven't already, and just take care of that backup code.
And maybe some of this stuff that we're talking about is in the works and talked about.
Sure.
And then there might even be documentation on their site about it. I just haven't looked. It came out yesterday.
I haven't looked either, I'll admit. But I do know when we talked about it before, we thought SMS was an interesting approach. I don't think we were necessarily all in favor of it. We thought, it could have been done differently, and I'm impressed by what they've done here. So who knows what's coming.
Yeah, I applaud them for kind of innovating, doing
Yeah.
some innovation on the two-factor. So anyway, with that, I can wrap it up. Keith should be back next week. I'm not sure what we're going to talk about. We might talk about the Black Hat and DEF CON vulnerabilities that were come out. We might have a special episode on that, which is possible we could go over our 20 to 30 minutes that we normally do, because there's a lot to talk about. But we'll see.
Yeah, we
Set
could
some
have
time and
Yeah, we could have Keith just give us he could probably talk for a lot about the training he's been through, but he's probably sick of it at this
It's
point.
also possible we might split that up into 2 different podcasts, but we'll see. We'll see how much we got and how much we can talk about. But anyway, thank you, Mike Hill. I'm Preston Wiley. Have a safe and secure day.